so I'm just going to do a quick introduction for you guys. So tonight we're doing parliamentary procedure. It's a workshop. So basics of parliamentary law, principles of rules of order, hierarchy of rules, which would include the Ralph-M-Brown Act, review of bylaws, meeting management skills, processing motions, resolutions, and proposals, election of commissioners or commission officers, and we're going to have some interactive scenarios with you guys. I wanted to introduce you to David Mezzera. He's a member of the American Institute of Parliamentarians, the California State Association of Parliamentarians, and the National Association of Parliamentarians. For the latter group, he has achieved the highest level of accreditation, which is Professional Registered Parliamentarian. Through the years of studying Robert Rules of Orders, teaching classes of parliamentary law and meeting management, taking advanced classes in parliamentary procedure, and working with groups as hired parliamentarian and bylaws consultant. And there's a lot of other things, but I think most importantly, he's supposed to make it fun. So with that, I want to introduce David, and we're glad that you're here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll be sitting, standing, moving around, involving you. I want to start with an apocryphal story. Apocryphal story. Could be true, it could be. It is about a branch manager of Union Bank here in Salinas.
Like in Wells Fargo.
Union Bank.
Don't get away.
And he was accused of embezzling over $2 million, was put on trial, found guilty, they never found the money, and ended up in San Quentin, near where I live, on the north tip of San Francisco Bay. And every day he wrote a letter to his wife here in Salinas, still living on a farm just south of here. And every day she answered it and wrote a letter back, every day. And one spring, she wrote a letter to her husband and said, I think it's about time that we started planting our lettuce crop on the back 40. What should I do? He received the letter and wrote back immediately, almost frantically, whatever you do, don't disc, don't plow the back 40. Don't do it. Sent the letter. She got the letter. The next day, she wrote a letter to her husband that said, the FBI was here today plowing up the back 40. What should I do? He gets the letter, writes back immediately, now you can plant the lettuce crop. Because he understood the rules that were in play. And that's the trick when, I know some of you are part of the Airport Commission, some of you other commissions or boards here, yes?
No,
Actually, it's all our commission. No one else showed up, so.
Okay. But to make the Airport Commission work, all of you have to know the rules. Now the problem is, if some people don't know the rules, then they might be overloaded and be out in the South 40, not knowing how the system should work. There's also a problem, occasionally I deal with groups that have a smart aleck who thinks she or he knows the rules and overlords over everybody else without necessarily really knowing the rules. So today I'd like to try to get everybody up to equal speed. If a question comes up during the presentation on something that I've said, or if I've used a term you don't understand, stop me and ask. If it's a question about some procedure or policy, or you want Brett to leave the room, Bob to leave the room, you want to find out what problems are going on, at the tail end there'll be plenty of time to ask questions on specifics on how I can help. But as Brett said, I've got 8 or 10 different items I want to cover. cover. The first of which is the basics of parliamentary law, asking the question, what is parliamentary law? Well, I'm first starting with what it isn't. Running a meeting using parliamentary procedures is not consensus-building decision-making. That's a totally different type of decision-making. If in this group with 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 of us, we were going to order 11, we were going to order out for pizza and just say, let's come to a consensus on what topping we put on the pizza. It would be pretty tough for 11 of us to come to a consensus. Okay. However, parliamentary practice is not autocratic decision-making. So if Bob is the chair of the commission, and he says, well, I don't like pepperoni, I only like anchovies, that's what we're going to do, then potentially there are 10 dissatisfied people. So if this is not parliamentary practice, what is it? And in general terms, parliamentary procedure is a tool that is used by a group such as yours, which is a decision-making body. You're a deliberative body. You make decisions to send suggestions to the city council. I suspect you can make certain decisions on your own that affect just the airport. So it's a tool of your decision-making body, your deliberative body, to be able to make decisions. And again, everybody needs to know what the rules are. And don't let that disturb you, because I've read over your bylaws and I've looked over your common order of business, and you've got a pretty simple type of organizational structure. And then we're going to get into actually playing a game of meeting. I said that once to a group in San Francisco. It was in a city AIDS decision-making body, and I used the word game. And one of the gentlemen raised his hand and said, Dave, I was like, this is not a game, this is really serious. I said, yeah, you're right about that. But in many ways, playing your decision-making meeting is in many ways like a game. And with games, you have players, you have roles. Who's the vice chair?
Quiet.
Too long.
Executive secretary. So you have roles, just like a game. You have a goal, and you know, well, in your old set of bylaws, you had actually a whole list of roles that goals you should accomplish. You have tools. I pulled out the proverbial gavel. You probably don't need that, but you have other tools such as minutes, and the bylaws themselves are part of the rules. And then the strategy. In a sports game, the strategy is, let's play the game better than anybody else. But I'm going to suggest your strategy should be to make the game work better than any other commission. So we're going to codify some of the tools to make your meetings work. And to do that, you need the rules. Now, parliamentary rules are found in what are called parliamentary authorities. And anybody can write their own parliamentary authority. That's kind of what the U.S. Senate does every 2 years. They write their own rules. The House of Representatives uses the parliamentary authority based upon Thomas Jefferson's Manual of Parliamentary Procedure. put together when he was
Little mouse.
which he put together when he was vice president of the Senate. And then ironically, the Senate doesn't use Jefferson's rules, but the House pretty much does. In the United States, there are 99 legislative state bodies. Nebraska has a unicameral legislature, and the other 49 states have bicameral. So like the California Senate and the California State Assembly. And of those 99, most use a tome called Mason's Manual of Legislative Procedures. The two California houses use Mason's Manual. Mason used to be the parliamentarian for the state senate back in the 1920s and 30s. And he thought that he needed to put down the rules so they weren't just kind of rewritten every 2 years. So a lot of legislative groups use Mason's Manual. I suspect that your city council uses Robert's Rules of Order,
Yes.
just based upon the fact that they ask you to use that as a commission. Well, there are other. Demeter's manual, George Demeter wrote this kind of as a contrary to Robert's Rules of Order, to try to make it simple. Some civic organizations will use this. Another possible manual is the Standard Code of Parliamentary Procedure that was written originally by a woman named she was a teacher at Berkeley. It should be Sturgis, Alice Sturgis. Again, kind of local as was Mason. And her intention was to make a simplified Robert's Rules of Order. And she did in some ways, and in some ways made it more complicated. Groups such as the California State Nurses Association will use this. So when I do a presentation, I've never done anything with the legislature, but occasionally I will have to do a presentation and bone up on Demeter's or Sturgis's, now it's Standard Code of Practice. Usually it's Robert's Rules of Order. Now this too, interestingly, has a San Francisco connection. This was written in 1876, the year of the centennial of the country, by Henry M. Robert, who at the time was a major in the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, stationed at the Presidio of San Francisco. And he would go to a meeting at the YMCA and at his local Baptist church, and they would say, "Oh, you're an officer, would you run the meeting?" And he felt incapable of doing that, especially in the 1860s, post-Civil War. People were coming still for gold, and from all over the country, everybody had their own idea on how to run a meeting. So he said, wouldn't it be nice if I could write a pocket manual of rules of order for deliberative assemblies, which is what he called it, and it was about that thing. Self-published. And then people started sending him questions, and he wrote a second edition with more information about that thing, and a third. And in 1915, he was getting much older, but his son, Henry Martin Robert Jr., took up the challenge with him, and they wrote Robert's Rules of Order Revised. And then many years later, and that one was about like this, many years later, his grandson took over the task with some other authors, and in 1970 wrote Robert's Rules of Order newly revised. And it had a few changes in 70, 2000, and this is the 11th edition in 2011. And it contains much more than you need to run a meeting. It contains how to run a convention, how to write bylaws, different officers that you don't have. It's overkill. Well, 700 total pages, 600 and some odd 70 pages of text. And yes,
You mentioned, is there conventions? Did I misunderstand? Conventions?
conventions.
Conventions.
How to run a convention. So, if you're going to do 2 or 3,000 member convention, you have delegates. How do you set them up? So, there are 3 principles that guide any of these parliamentary authorities, and certainly true with Robert. And the principles are just given. Based upon a democratic view, principle number 1 is that the will of the majority will ultimately decide. Now again, I don't want to get too political, but is it a majority of the people? Is it a majority of the delegates? Is it a majority of the electoral college? At some point, the rules say a majority of something will decide. So if we were deciding the type of pizza to get, we couldn't come to a consensus probably to have everybody agree. We don't want Bob to choose anchovies for us, no offense. But if we took a vote, if there are 11 people here, a vote of 6 would make a majority. And the rules exist for all, so that if the majority speaks, everybody agrees to play by the majority rule. And that's just the way it is. Some people don't like that. I've been politely challenged to say, we don't want to use Robert's Rules of Order because you have winners and losers. We want to use consensus decision-making where everybody wins. And so we taught that one through. Ultimately, the will of the majority, but principle number 2, the rights and privileges of the non-majority must always be protected. So if 6 people say pepperoni and 5 say olive, well, those 5 still have the opportunity to have the pepperoni pizza. May not be their first choice, but they have the right as the non-majority. In a business sense, the non-majority must have their rights protected. You can't kick them out of the commission meeting because the vote was 6 to 1 against them and say, well, now you have to leave. No, they have every right. They have every right to speak and to debate and to make motions and to do everything else of everybody. However, everybody has to agree up front to play by rule number 1 and 2. And the example I use, and may work better up in the North Bay, is that when the Giants and the A's play against each other in interleague, they have to come together before the game and decide what rules are we going to use, National League or American League. And the Major League Baseball makes it easy because if you're at the Giants Park, you play by National League rules. If you're at, what's it called now, O.Co. or Oakland Park, you play by the American League rules. But both teams have to agree to that. You can't, in the middle of the game, say, oh, we don't want to play by the rules. Okay. And our pretend bank officer, he was playing by the rules that were set by the San Quentin officials, because he knew the rules. And again, you have to kind of know the rules so that everybody can be on the same page. Okay, speaking of rules, there is a hierarchy of rules, starting with Robert's Rules of Order. Now, Robert's Rules of Order define certain things such as quorum, which I'll talk about in a minute. Talks about voting, what vote thresholds are necessary. So this is the basis. There it is. Everything in order. I am missing. Oh, it's right here.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
On quorum.
Oh, okay.
Say there's 7 bodies in your committee, and 3 of them don't show up. Does the quorum change from 7 to, say, there's only 4 there? Does the quorum change?
No. Robert says the quorum, by definition, is the minimum number of members necessary to do business legally. And he says, unless your bylaws say otherwise, a quorum is a majority of the members.
Of the 7?
In your case, 7. Yes. Now, what if it's a Rotary Club of Salinas that has 150 members? And Robert says that a majority is a quorum, so that would be 76 members. And the Rotary Club says, we never get 76 members. So what they do is they establish bylaws that specify what is a quorum for that group. And these are your Salinas Airport Commission bylaws, approved June 23rd, 16, which are in effect for a very short time, right? Okay? If you're running your meetings according to these bylaws, then the bylaws have precedent over Robert's rules. So your bylaws say, would be under meetings. Under meetings, it says that a quorum is a majority of commissioners. So if there are 7 seated commissioners, then you need 4 of the 7 to legally have a meeting. If 1 is absent, 6 you have a meeting. If 2 is absent, you have 5, that's a legitimate meeting. Even if 3 are absent and you have 4 present, then you have fulfilled the quorum requirement. If 1 person has to leave, now can you have 3 people making a decision for no? Robert would say that the definition of the quorum has been violated and you cannot legally have a meeting. But it's common for a group, whether it's the Rotary Club or your commission, have bylaws that specify how you run your meeting, not how Robert ran a meeting in 1876 or look through here on some other formal meeting. Your bylaws supersede Robert. Now those have actually been superseded further by a uniform bylaw for city commissions, committees, and boards by the City Council of Salinas. And they said, you must run your commission using this set of bylaws. So you must have a chairperson elected, a vice chairperson elected. Somebody must select an executive secretary, and your elections must be in July. Okay? And that's specified by your uniform bylaws. Then under meetings, Section 4, quorum. A majority of the appointed members of the commission, committee, or board shall constitute a quorum. So it's real simple. 4. If one of the commissioners resigns and your city council member has not appointed a replacement, what is your quorum?
Still 4?
Still 4, that's right. Because a majority of 6 is more than half, I think. No action should be taken except by the affirmative vote of a majority of the members present. Now, that's a little different than quorum. Once you have quorum, which is a fancy Latin word that Robert came up with because he liked Latin when he took it in high school. Once you have the quorum, which means of which or by which, once you have the number by which you can have a legal meeting, don't even think of the word quorum again. As long as you have 4 members present, you can run a meeting. Now it says the affirmative vote of the majority of the members present. So if all 7 members are present, then yeah, a majority is 4. If only 5 members are present, you have a quorum. How many are needed to pass a resolution? Only 3 of 5. Now, that's Parliamentary Procedure 101. I'm going to give you a little 102 here. Voting on matters coming before the Commission Committee Board will be by roll call and the vote entered into the minutes. Okay? Any member or members abstaining from determining an item, said member or member shall be counted as present for the purpose of determining a quorum. So, 7 members, 4 present, quorum. What if the vote is 1 yes and 3 abstain?
Passes.
It passes. Okay? According to Robert, it passes of those present and voting. But according to your bylaws, and this you need to study a little bit, all of you on this. This says, no action should be taken except by the affirmative vote of the majority of the members present. Yeah, that's a little different. So, if a member votes no, believe it or not, that has the same effect as a member abstaining.
Right? Because it's not an affirmative.
It's not an affirmative vote, exactly. So 2 members are absent, you've got 5 present. Takes 3 of the 5 to vote affirmatively. 3 yes, 2 no, it passes. 2 yes, 1 no, you think, it passes. But the other 2 abstaining is the equivalent of no vote. Now, a lot of city councils will in effect not allow someone to vote abstain. I don't know how Salinas is with their city council. But some city councils say if you're here and you have a constituency and you represent people, the only 2 votes you can have are yes or no. Unless you recuse yourself because of some personal interest. And then the city attorney will approve and get that. But what you're really looking for is a legal meeting has the quorum, and once that happens, anything that you do within that meeting requires a majority of those present. So, Here are the bylaws for city commissions, committees, and boards. The rules I just read to you are a little different than Robert's rules, but they take precedent over Robert's rules. But that's not where the hierarchy ends. You fall under, you are a charter city in Salinas. You have a municipal code, you have a city charter, and that guides probably all of this. But you also have to play the game of what the city council says. They have the final say. You give them a recommendation on certain matters, and they will decide for you. So the city council and the municipal code and the city charter have even greater priority. Now, do you also fall under FAA regulations and guidelines? Yeah. Well, that's the national level. There's something at the state level that you fall under too, which is the Ralph M. Brown Act, open meeting laws, that the city council comes under, all the boards and commissions of this city and every other city, school boards, you name it. If you're getting public funds, you have to play certain meeting rules based upon Ralph M. Brown. So for instance, way back here, your uniform bylaws might say that you must publicly notice a commission meeting in certain locations around the city, publicly, 4 days before your commission meeting. Could say that. Brown says all of the people that fall under Brown have to post 3 days, 72 hours before a meeting. Which would win out?
The Brown.
Brown
3 days.
really says, I kind of misguided you here, Brown says at least 72 hours. Now, if your bylaw said 48 hours, no way. And if you posted something 48, 49, 50 hours before, you would be in violation of Brown. It's got to be 72 at least. So, if the municipal code says 1 week before, then that would supersede your bylaws. It would really take an attorney, which I am not, to fully understand all of the ins and outs of Brown. When I deal with the Brown Act, with the groups that use it, it's mainly for notice of meetings and public votes, also public presentations, public comments, and public votes. But you can have an executive session under Brown. So if, let's say, a member of the commission is going to be asked to resign, and that's a private personnel matter, you can meet an executive session. But please don't take my word. Go to the city attorney to interpret Brown so you don't get yourself in trouble. So it's mainly an posting 72 hours before. You can have an emergency meeting if you post 24 hours before. And then you're satisfying Brown. There's other things with, there's also state codes and so on. Again, it takes an attorney. And I won't even begin to figure out what regulations you fall under here, but those would be overriding still. So don't get too upset with Robert. Number one, it's 607 pages. And it's a fallback. Most bylaws will say our parliamentary authority is Robert's Rules of Order unless otherwise superseded by these bylaws. And I think that's kind of what your uniform bylaws for the city says. Robert's Rules of Order, or those rules of order and procedure used by the city council in case they change, will provide guidelines for those aspects of proceedings not specifically provided for in these bylaws. Now, here's a little out for you. However, action by the commission, committee, or board will not be invalidated because of a technical violation of these rules. So, somebody's not going to come back to you in the next meeting, the next month, and say, "Oh, you took a vote by majority. It should have been a 2/3 vote, so throw it out." So you're protected. Do your best, and I'll give you a few sample ways of trying to do your best.
Can I ask a question
Please do.
about the Brown Act?
Yeah.
It seems like I've heard, if 3 of us are together or something, if we discuss something on the commission, they go, "Oh, that's a violation of the Brown Act." Why is that? I mean, I don't understand what we were violating or what we could be violating.
I mean, I didn't hear the setup. I'm sorry.
So there's 3 of us in a car.
Oh.
And we're driving to another meeting, and we talk about the commission, or something on the airport commission, whatever, and then we go, "Oh, well, we've got to be careful. We'll violate the Brown Act," and I don't understand what that means. So, could you tell me
Yeah.
that?
The Brown Act is conveniently called the Public Meeting Law. Your meetings must be in public. You represent the constituents of this geographic area. You or the commission and the airport are getting public monies. And they don't want, they being the state, doesn't want private, secret meetings. And you can call one person and say, what's coming up on the agenda, and the 2 of you can talk privately. But Brown says you cannot do sequential private meetings. So you can't call the gentleman and call the lady and call each one separately and do the same thing. The minute you do that to more than one person, it becomes a meeting, and it's not a public meeting.
So that would be the same thing that if how many is that? 2 or more, or
More than 2.
more than 2? Okay, so there's some of us that are all in a different meeting. How do we keep that Brown Act clean? That we don't violate the Brown Act by just not talking about any of the commission meetings? Or is there a presumption that all of us are together, that we are secretly meeting?
Yeah, well, if you're all at a citywide cocktail party or reception, that's not a problem. But you don't speak commission business. What they're worried about, or Brown procedure principles worried about, is that you and others are making decisions based upon non-public information.
Okay.
So you have convinced him to vote your way. And the 2 of you can talk about it, but the minute you either physically bring a 3rd person in, or you do the same kind of thing, call and try to convince the other person, and that is a violation. And then, again, I'm not an attorney, so I'm being taped, but this is not a
It's for entertainment value.
talk to your city attorney. And rarely will a challenge come up that Brown has been violated. Usually it's by a citizen who thinks that there was a violation and will challenge you to your immediate supervisor, which would be the city council.
Well, as a commissioner, I don't think any of us want to violate the Brown Act, whether, it's perceived or for real.
And I think about 2 years ago, my recollection is that there was a initiative passed that changed the decision-making body from the Attorney General of the state of California to the county, what's the head legal office of the county. Instead of taking Brown all the way to the state, I think it has to be resolved at the county level. Sorry.
So, if somebody, say we're in meeting, and somebody asks us, well, at this, airport commission meeting, we need to raise the rates on the hangar, and we address the situation, and there's more than 3 commissioners there, and it's not a meeting, should we invite that meeting is going to take place?
Brett, I was going to answer your question, I was going to ask this question. You have in your previous bylaws a superb order of business. Do you still follow that by custom?
Yes.
So to answer your question, consideration items would be raising the rate of the administrative reports, announcements, those would be notices that you're going to do something in the future. And if something is brought up at one of your commission meetings for the first time and is not noticed in the order of business posted 72 hours, you cannot make a decision informational only. But you can give the notice at this meeting that you would like to consider raising the rates at the next meeting. And then 72 hours before the next meeting, it would show up under an action item or a consideration item. And then nobody should have to ask you, are you going to look and consider it? Because it's posted in the public forum. But that's part of Brown. You cannot make a decision on a policy or money issue that is not noticed 72 hours before, which then allows the public knowledge, and the public can do comments about it and let you know.
Jim, were you referring to more like a SOPA meeting? Is that what you? So what he was saying was we have a pilot association meeting that we meet at once a month, and at that pilot association meeting, we talk about the latest topics in and around the airport or the aviation community. And sometimes we have more than 3 members of the commission, because they're all active in the association also. And at those meetings, sometimes they ask, well, what's happening with the airport rates? And so what I think he was asking, at this separate meeting where there happens to be a quorum based off of their affiliation with the association, that they talk about raising the rates, is it appropriate for the commissioners to engage in that conversation?
You should just listen. Because if you make it appear that you're starting to make a decision or you are deliberating the matter, that can only be done at a noticed commission meeting.
But if we noticed that SOPA meeting as being open for consideration of airport items, then we would be okay.
If you noticed it as a commission special meeting,
No, it's not a commission special.
I think you're treading on pretty dangerous grounds there. That to give any opinion tantamount to meeting as a commission. Now, I have had city council members say to me, I can't talk to you. And I call and say to a city council member, can I talk to you about sewer issue? No, I can't because it would violate Brown. And I just laugh at them. And I say, would you please go and talk to the city attorney? You know, it sounds like a private citizen cannot not even talk to a city council member, that does not violate Brown. But if you've got 4 commission members, which has happened to be present, and even the word airport commission comes up, I'd say you've got to be real careful about expressing an opinion.
How can you have an opinion if you haven't discussed it with your peers?
Well, yeah, you can discuss it with your peers, but you can't discuss it with the other members of the commission. Oh, did you say peers or?
I said peers. How can you come to, how can you make up your mind? How can you've got to discuss it in order to say, well, we think that this and this and this are the reasons that we need to do this other thing, and somebody else says, have you thought about this point of view? Unless you have a conversation, you can't go to a meeting and make a decision cold without discussing it with your peers. Now, it may be that when I discuss it, there may be only people that are not commissioners that I'm discussing it with. That will happen at the airport sometimes. Sometimes there'll be one other commissioner. Sometimes we'll have a solo meeting and there'll be more people present. We even have an airport appreciation day where we invite all commissioners. And at that, you're saying that we couldn't even talk about the policy of cleaning up the front yard here with the airport, because that might be airport commission business.
I would say at this point,
I'm a little puzzled.
pose that to your city attorney.
I think it would be more if there was a current item that was being considered by the commission, and then I could ask the city attorney to clear that, that's when it becomes applicable. I don't think that it would stop you from talking about items that are happening around the airport. More if it's an item that's currently or that we know is in the future, immediate future is going to be discussed.
We talk about budget, we talk about things like how much pesticide you put on the lawn out there.
Yeah.
And it's an item. So let's go on, because this isn't
But I
necessary.
think they're good questions. I think they're really good questions, and the stuff that we can vet out from a Robin Brown point of view from the city attorney.
There was an ad hoc committee made up of industry people with respect to the construction industry to work with the Mid-Center to improve their processes and how they did things. Well, and they would be very successful. I mean, working with the Mid-Center. It got shut down because a private citizen complained. And this is something that had nothing to do with the construction industry. But yet, if you go that percent level and get a building permit, you would have found that the changes that are made would make the whole process easier. So you do have to be very careful. There are people out there who will rat you out in a heartbeat. It's the bottom line. So they didn't have to the building department a couple years ago. And they had just been the ad hoc committee to proceed around violations. They were public notice meetings.
You make a great point, though. How can you make a decision unless
If you can't discuss it,
And-
you can't do it.
And
And not all discussions can necessarily take place at a meeting, because you have to meet with people who you represent. And sometimes those people you represent are present with other people who are also commissioners.
Isn't that akin to meeting with your constituents? If you can do that, I mean,
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
basically what you're doing. You're not meeting with another commissioner necessarily.
And when we do one of the scenarios that gets into the issue, are we ready to make a decision today? See some ways to get around that.
I think Wes has.
Yeah, I was curious about the quorum. You mentioned quorum, and you need so many people, and if somebody leaves, then you can't have a meeting. But what about like announcements or presentations, stuff that you don't have to have action on? Can you do that much?
Yes, the quorum, you can legally conduct business, but other things in the meeting you can still do without the quorum. For instance, if you did not have a quorum today, or this wasn't an official meeting, I can still do a presentation. You can still have administrative reports, still have announcements, you can still have general public comments. Well, here is future agenda items. You can announce what's going to be on the next agenda. you can do things other than
Voting.
legal business. Okay. One other thing in your bylaws, I've talked a little bit about quorum and voting. One thing in your bylaws, the old version of the order of business is D, consent items.
Say that again.
Consent items. Do you use a consent calendar?
Yes.
We have a consent agenda, and that's typically the minutes.
Yeah. Let me tell you what Robert says. He strongly advocates the use of a consent calendar, a consent agenda, consent items. One of my clients is the California Community College Academic Senate. And they meet twice a year with 117. You have Gavilan College nearby here, and 117 community colleges meet. And they do 20 to 30, sometimes 40 resolutions in the matter of 6 hours. And it was going on and on and on. And I suggested, I said, you present a resolution, somebody reads it, somebody introduces it. You say, does anybody wish to speak in favor of it? And the school that authored it speaks for 2 or 3 minutes. And then you say, does anybody wish to speak against it? And nobody stands up. So are you ready for the vote? It takes 5 minutes to do all of that. And I said, if you have 10 of those 40 resolutions that are non-controversial, that nobody is in disagreement, put them into a consent agenda, consent calendar, and take care of them like that. And they saved 15 minutes, and they thought I was a genius. Oh, no, Robert's reward is a genius. Anything that you want to put on your agenda as an action item or an item of consideration that you're going to vote on and is foreseeing that all of the commissioners are in favor of, why just have 2 or 3 people speak in favor of it? It's kind of like hear yourself speak. The purpose of speaking or debating or deliberation is to inform others that your side is right, maybe get them to change their view. So if all 7 of you are going to agree, I think it's great that you have consent items such as the minutes of the previous meeting. If there are certain things such as changing the brand of fertilizer to use in front here, you can make that decision. Something that's non-controversial, put it on a consent calendar. Now here's how a consent calendar works. Let's say you've got 5 items, the minutes, changing the type of light bulbs, different type of fertilizer, 4 and 5. Nobody's going to object. Okay, watch how you can take care of 5 business items in less than 30 seconds. We have the 5 items on the consent calendar. They were posted. They were noticed. Is there any objection to those 5 items? Anybody wish to take one of those items off of the consent calendar and consider it full? Not hearing any objection? Then the consent calendar is adopted. And it's done.
And the council, the city council does approve that.
Yeah.
They believe.
Exactly.
And only one person has to request to take one
And
out.
that's it. So when I said, is there anyone wish to pull, any one of the commissioners, without having to say why, says, yes, I would like to pull this item number 5. Okay?
Could it be a member of the public?
No.
Question? So if often the minutes have corrections, so I might say pull minutes if I have something. Sometimes nobody sees minutes, so that was, you answered the question I was going to ask.
Now,
Excuse me, I'm sorry, but we have a roll call approval on all of our votes, so with that consent, will we have to go through that roll call also then?
Yes. Yep. So once you pass asking if there's anyone that has any objections, if there's none, Chris, roll call vote. Then we go through just like that.
The public also has able to pull one of the items.
Not according to Robert, maybe according to,
Yes.
so if your Salinas Municipal Code or your, okay. And so I speak out of ignorance there because that's a local procedure that your city councils. So I'm sorry, yes, most boards, commissions that are not public, private, only the board or commission members. Now, here's an interesting one about the minutes. Robert says you never vote to approve or accept or adopt the minutes. Well, what would be a negative vote? A negative vote would mean I don't like them in the form that they're in because there's a mistake. So you say, here are the minutes, are there any corrections? Anybody who has a correction, in effect, says, I vote no on the way the minutes originally were. Now, somebody says, my correction is that I made that motion, you did not, and the minutes record you as making it. And then you say, no, I made it. Well, you can actually vote among the council members of, do we change the minutes with my name or keep them with her? And it's the collective recall of the group. If you adopt the minutes, you can still go back a month, a year later and correct them if there really is still a mistake. But typically in a meeting, you have the minutes. Are there any corrections? If there are no corrections, then the minutes stand approved as written. Now,
We usually scan. No,
vote that way.
We still go with the roll call.
okay, now,
Yeah.
I worked with RD 799, which is a reclamation district out in East Contra Costa County. 5 members. I actually ran some meetings for them to show them how a meeting can be run a little more efficiently. So there are 5 members, and we get to that point. And I said, if there's no objection, the minutes will be adopted. If there's an objection, make a change now. The minutes are approved as written. Will the secretary please record a unanimous vote of all 5 board members? Now, I don't know whether I was getting in trouble with the County of Contra Costa by not physically saying, Mr. Jones, Mrs. Smith, I'm not sure. But in effect, we took a unanimous decision vote that quickly, and then rather than the secretary saying, Mr. Jones, how do you vote? I vote aye. We sped things up.
Who mandated the roll call vote? Because that's something that changed within the last couple of
Callahan.
years.
It's just from the city clerk's office.
It's also, must be a recorded vote.
Yeah.
Says now, if the city clerk's office, you might ask them, and it's not a big deal, it saves a minute, but you might ask them if it is a unanimous consent vote, can it be recorded by each person's name? If one person is absent, then you record them as absent, and the other person's vote yes. And if you do it the way you do it now, it's just.
They went that way just for consistency among the commissions. So it was, because we were doing unanimous votes, and some people were doing roll
Right.
calls, and some, I mean, so But that's an interesting question. I made a note to ask the city clerk and city attorney if there's a need for approval on minutes, or can we just, the minutes stand as published or written, so.
With unanimous consent, that's the key term, unanimous consent, so that everybody present is voting yes. And then you record it in that fashion. Okay, the next item here is some meeting management skills. The first suggestion that I have, I've got 4 or 5, 6, is to learn the custom of the group when you enter the group. So if some of you are fairly new, pay real close attention to things like if they use unanimous consent. Custom works until somebody discovers that what you've been doing all these years violate Brown or regulation or city charter. So the custom works until there's a reason to challenge it. Example, what kind of a creature is Humpty Dumpty?
An egg?
Everybody knows that. That's custom. If you look at the children's poem, Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, Humpty Dumpty had a fall, Humpty Dumpty never mentions who, what Humpty Dumpty is. We just assume because someone probably drew a cartoon book of Humpty Dumpty as an egg. If somebody wanted to use the same concept, that somebody comes and they can't fix it, that's sort of like Humpty Dumpty. Humpty Dumpty could be a toy soldier, could be a little girl, could be anything. But by custom, we say, Humpty Dumpty's a man. So if you are always doing things one way, that doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't mean, if it works, fine. If there's something that you're just not sure of, be willing to ask, is that because of the rules or because of custom? Now, watch what you can do. Robert, bylaws, city charter. You can create for your commission special rules of order that don't violate, and don't violate. If your special rules of order violate Robert, that's okay. Here's an example. Robert says, and it's been this way for 100 some odd years, that the maximum allotted time for any one stand on the floor, any one speech by any one member is 10 minutes. Maximum. Well, I know of no groups that want every stand on the floor to go 8, 9, 10 minutes. So here again, by custom, everybody in the commission says his or her piece, doesn't go on, then there's not a problem. But I know a lot of groups have a special rule of order that says for any one item of business, we will discuss it for a maximum of 15 minutes. Or for any one item of business, you may only speak 2 times maximum. Or for any one order of business, you can speak no more than 2 minutes at a time. Because that's how they feel their meetings can better function. So again, if it's not a problem, don't worry about it. But you can come up with special rules of order that seem to violate Robert. Robert even allows you to have special rules of order. Now, they can't violate your bylaws, because the bylaws are superseded. But there are all sorts of possible rules of order that you can come up with to make the meeting more manageable. Two M's M's is Mickey Mantle or Marilyn Monroe. 3 M's is Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing. 4 M's is making meetings more manageable. That's kind of why I'm here, and what hopefully you will find a little bit today. Another meeting management skills goes back to your question of how do you find out? Let committees do your work. You are authorized to have a committee of no more than 3. And you can establish your own working, studying, research committees. In fact, your bylaws recommend that you do. So don't make a decision today on increasing the cost of the hangar. Create a committee of 3. Is that something you're interested in? Then let's get you to serve on somebody else. Research it. Find out what other airports are doing. Find out the square footage. Find out when was the last time that a raise was made. And then bring it back next time under reports so we can then put the item back on the agenda to maybe make a decision this time. So don't make all 7 of the members do their own work. They can. But a trick of the trade, a meeting management skill, is to let committees do something.
Our airport manager does that. Is that enough?
If that works, great.
Because all of those things that you said, he did all of that research and had it all, given to us.
Okay, and Brett also is your executive secretary and the airport manager. He says, well, I'd like some help. I'd like to expand this a little bit. Create a committee. Is he a member of the commission?
Are you a member of the commission?
No. But Robert says you can put non-members of the board, committee, or commission on a committee if the group approves it.
I'm sorry, so you kind of act as our committee then? Correct? I mean, in that,
Yeah,
that way you kind of think is,
I provide the information, which is essentially what the committee would be doing. If what I was doing wasn't sufficient, then you could, even if it was sufficient, you could put together your own committee. I traditionally do that because I want you to have information.
These committee members that you're speaking about, are they appointed by the commissioners, or can the commissioners be a part of those 3 committees?
I believe the latter is true. Let me try to find where
The chairman could appoint the committee. So are we a commissioner when we make those decisions, or are we a committee member even though we are commissioners?
Committee is going to be an advisor, so.
Yeah, you're bringing.
You're gonna look at the
You're
information.
bringing someone else in.
Yeah, you're bringing information, you're not bringing in a decision.
Here's what it says on committees. Committees of the commission, committee, or board may be established to pursue the goals and programs of the body. It says 2 more. I think it means no more than 3 members may serve on each committee. Non-members of the public may also participate in the committees. And I think that's a typo. I think it means non-members of the commission, committee, or board may serve. Subject to the approval of the commission, committee, or board, can set their own rules and meeting schedule. Committees will report to the body regularly with updates and recommendations and accounting for time spent on members, non-members of the public on board items. Robert says that the group can establish a committee, and in one of the scenarios, you will see where that actually happens and why. So that's another skill, is to let the committees do the work.
So is that done through a motion second and then a vote as to whether you want the committee established?
And typically, in the motion, it will say how many on the committee, what its goal is, who appoints the members, who is the chair. specify all of that. If not, it's usually up to the chair of the commission to say, I will appoint the committee, we'll ask them to report at the next meeting, and these are the things. You establish that group to work for you. And you can appoint Brett to be on a committee. And you can appoint a computer specialist from outside to be on the committee, or a financial wizard to be on the committee. Robert says, and the bylaws say, non-members of the commission to be on the committee. Some rules for debate. Now, again, I don't know if this is a problem. On a commission of 7, some groups, so I'll play Bob as leading the discussion. So we're now going to be talking about an item that was presented on the agenda about increasing by 10% the cost of keeping a plane here. Technically, the person who introduced the motion is privileged to speak first. You introduced it, you can speak first.
When does a motion get introduced?
Under consideration items,
So typically, the way that we handle the meetings would be, I usually have some sort of presentation, so they turn the floor over to me, allow them to provide a presentation, and after that, I entertain questions, and then turn it back over to the commission.
and then formally, again, you'll see this happen in my scenario. A formal motion is made. I'll explain what a motion is. And now we're discussing. So you had your opportunity to say why you brought that.
Again, I'm so sorry. How do I know when a motion has just been made?
You'll know. Hold on.
Okay.
It'll be real. So Yvette, why you brought this forward. Some groups will then just go around clockwise or counterclockwise and say, Madam Commissioner, Mr. Commissioner, do you have anything you'd like to say, you'd like to add? Go around the table. Somebody can say pass. I don't know what your custom is. Some groups,
Raise your hands.
yeah, some groups want to do a queue. You raise your hand, okay, you're next, you're next. Other groups are so concerned about giving equal time to both sides that they will say, in effect, a tennis match. So you've given your reasons in favor of it. Does anybody wish to speak in opposition to or ask questions about this proposal? Okay. Now, you have had a chance to speak against it. Does anybody now wish to speak in favor of it? Nobody? Well, then we'll go back. Does anybody wish to speak against it? As long as you come up with a system that works for you, either going around the room, or going yes, no, or just raising your hand. Some groups will say, you raised your hand, you can speak. Some groups will say, you cannot be recognized again if anybody else wishes to speak for the first time. And those are kind of your special rules of order. If everything works great, Bob, when you run a meeting, then you don't have to work. But if some people come to you and say, I can never get recognized, I can never get my ideas in, then maybe you want to talk as a group about some special rule of order that will go on the affirmative, negative, back and forth, or raise a finger and you're called on.
Okay, so do you have to make a motion before we start talking about it? When does the motion come in here?
That's what
Okay.
that's,
Should we do that now?
It's a
yeah,
cliffhanger.
because that's where I am completely confused.
Yeah.
Let's do motions then. That's kind of coming up. Okay.
So Brett does a presentation about something.
Now, we're going to start from scratch on motions. Motion. A suggestion made by one member that she or he would like the entire group to consider and then adopt. That's what a motion is. Robert has 86 different specific motions. But they all do this. Okay? For example, the meeting has been going on for an hour. And I have a suggestion that we recess for 10 minutes. I have a suggestion that I'd like the entire group to consider and then accept. That's a motion. Now, the official, and we got to go by what Robert says, the official terminology is, I move that we recess for 10 minutes. Every motion is made by saying, I move that. Here is my suggestion that I'd like everybody to consider and to adopt. So this is one of the 86 motions is called the motion to recess. And that's what has just been made. I move that we recess for 10 minutes. Now, just like the rule book that an umpire carries in the back pocket for baseball to pull out and check the rules, Robert's rules has rules about all of those motions. Now, I'm not going to give you 86 different motions. In fact, 4 or 5 maximum will come up in a typical meeting. This, I had, do you have other members in these? Yeah. I guess I'm bragging a little bit. I had a hand in putting this together with the National Association of Parliamentarians. If you open it up to the middle, I am going to suggest that Bob have a copy of this on his desk as he runs a meeting, and that all of you have it, because now all of you know the rules for any one motion. Now, if you look under ranking motions on the left top, below that privileged motions, and 3 below that recess, there is the motion to recess, one of 86. This sheet only has 30, I think it's 30. So for starters, we've taken 86 motions that are not needed, put them down with the rule book with 30. And of those, only 4 or 5 are typically going to come up in meeting. But if this motion is made, this suggestion is made, then we have to know how to process it. So in the motion to recess, going across horizontally, there are 6 boxes. The first box is empty for the column that says interrupt. So if someone's in the middle of speaking about an item, can you just stand up and say, excuse me, Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, I would like to recess for 10 minutes. I move we recess. You can't interrupt a person for that particular motion. There are other motions that are so important that you could interrupt. Okay, the next box says S for second. As the word implies, is there a second person here besides the one making the motion who thinks that this is worthwhile to even discuss? If my motion was to pass the hat and to give today's presenter $100 for coming, anybody want to discuss that? Because if you don't, we won't waste time discussing it. Is there a second? No second. So the motion does not go forward. But for a 10-minute recess, does anybody wish to second it? It is second. That's all it takes, is a second person. And you can raise your hand, you can say second, you don't have to be recognized. It's just, is there a second person? Next column, is it debatable whether we recess for 10 minutes? No, that's the whole point. We've had too much debate already. So let's just make a decision. Now look at the next column, A for amend. What could be amended? The time factor.
20 minutes.
That's right. And then you would handle that as an amendment to this. And usually, it's just you take a vote. And what type of vote is needed? It says M, that's a majority. Now, Brett, this is a problem that I encounter not knowing about your custom. Robert says that matters of procedure can be handled quickly and easily by a voice vote. That you don't need to take a roll call to decide whether you're going to a recess. I guess that's something for the city attorney. If you have to take a roll call for doing everything, I don't think that's the purpose. You don't violate ground by saying those in favor of a 10-minute recess say aye, aye, those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and we will recess for 10 minutes. So that's completing that particular motion. Okay, there are many other motions, but usually what happens, and I think this is where you were getting hung up, something that has been noticed and is a consideration item. You get to that point in the agenda, and it's a proposal. It's something main that we're going to consider. We've got to see it through to its conclusion, or do something else with it. So the motion is that we increase, this has been noticed, we increase the charge for hosting a plane by 10%. Now, you can't make that decision, am I right? You have to send it to the city council. But you can make the recommendation as a proposal. Okay. Now, in Robert's rules terms, that is called a main motion. So on your goldenrod sheet, if you would look on the left side, way at the bottom, main motion. So here's your proposal to recommend to the city council that we increase the fee by 10%. It's on the agenda, it's been noticed, and somebody will then make the motion to adopt this resolution. Can't interrupt other business because there's no I in the first box. What happens in the second box? Is there a second to this motion?
What if, okay, in our instance, we weren't to the second, we were in discussion
Well,
or a debate.
you shouldn't get there quite yet. Let's go step by step, going across. The motion is made that we recommend to the city council that we increase the fees by 10%. Is there a second?
See no second.
If there's no second, then it dies for the lack of a second, because why waste time doing something that nobody wants to talk about?
Okay,
But
we're kind of lost here because we do things where Brett will bring up a consideration and we'll talk the heck out of it before we even get to the motion side.
I would debate that, Sue. When he brings something up, we will ask questions on his proposal.
Yes.
Then nothing happens until a motion is made, and then when the motion is made and seconded, then we discuss it amongst the board and then also open it to the public.
The first round of questions are usually directed towards me
Yeah.
for clarifying.
Right.
And so I clarify that, and after that it's turned over to the chair, and then the chair asks, is there a motion? Does anyone have a motion? And that's when one of the commissioners typically says, I motion that we accept the 10% raise in fees. Is there a second? And then usually someone jumps in, I second it, and then that's typically when you go into your debate, or if there's other clarifying questions with the chair or comments, we'll get into that phase.
But I thought that when you second something, that's what was in stone, and anything that you said after that was, okay, then.
All a second means is, this is worth discussing. A second person says, let's talk about
Okay.
it. And
If you don't get a second, there's nobody else that's in favor of it. So
Yeah.
why discuss it, basically?
Now, I've seen people who were opposed to it still second it because they officially want it on the record. Watch what happens. The motion is to increase our fees by 10%. Is there a second?
Sure.
Been seconded.
You can't vote.
The motion to increase our fees has been seconded and is now on the floor. Which means it belongs to you. It's not my motion anymore. It's on the floor. The chair has said, it is moved and seconded that we increase the fees by 10%. What's the next column over? D for debate. Now, Robert says the person making the motion should be privileged to speak first. So I made the motion, so I'm going to come up and I'm going to speak on the motion. I have the floor. The motion is on the floor. All the terms kind of fit together. There's no place up here for anyone else, so nobody else can talk. I have the floor. And when I finish, I will finish with a punchline saying, by golly, we gotta pass this. That's why I made the motion. Join me. Now I relinquish the floor. The chair says, who else would like to speak, or if you want to do the ping pong match, is there somebody now who is opposed to this 10% increase? Come forward. Okay, I'm opposed to it. So I'm speaking on the motion, I'm against the motion, I'm on the floor, and my objection is that I think 10% right now in these conditions is too much. We should be encouraging more people to come, and 10% is not going to encourage that. So I'm opposed to this. Please vote no. Well, there's another possibility. The next column over is amend. So that motion can be amended. What you're trying to do is come up with the best possible proposal to send to the city council. And how do you perfect it? Well, somebody's going to say, I move to amend by striking 10 and replacing it with 5%. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it is moved and seconded that we amend the original by striking 10 and inserting 5.
So the 10% now is completely went away.
No.
Nope, it's underneath it.
What's on the floor now?
Is the amend,
Well-
the main motion, and no?
No, you first you vote on the amendment,
Where,
and then,
Just the amendment. Just the amendment is visible, which is 10, 5, yeah. And since I made the motion, I'll tell you why I think it should be 5. Somebody else can speak against the amendment and say, no, 5% isn't going to be enough, we need 10. Okay? And you go back and forth. At some point now, you are on a different line above the main motion on the goldenrod sheet. 2 above it is amend, which took a second. It is being debated. At some point, we need to adopt or vote on the amendment. And 2 things can happen. If the amendment passes,
So, excuse me, what you're saying is on the amendment, that vote has to be taken either yes or no. If it happens to be no, then you can go back up to the 10% vote.
watch
This
out.
one has to be finished first.
That's right. Right now, there is no debate on whether we should or should not increase the fees. The only debate is, do you want the motion to be 10% or 5%? That's all it is. I work with a hospital group, and they they decide where they're going to put some of their volunteer money, and they want to put money to toys for the pediatric ward. And that's what the motion is. And somebody says, I'm voting against that because I think that we should spend money on a different ward. So I'm going to vote no. And then somebody else says, I'm going to amend that from $100 for toys for the pediatric ward to $50. The only thing on the floor is the amendment, 100 versus 50. It has nothing to do with whether it goes to the pediatric ward or to the geriatric ward. That's not under consideration. And that's where a lot of groups get way off track. The only thing on the floor now is 5% versus 10%. If you take a vote, see, and I'm used to show of hands. If you've got 7, it takes 4 to vote yes on that amendment. I'm not sure you have to do a roll call. Robert says no, but that's something that you can ask the city council or the city attorney. But if you vote 4 yes and 3 no to amend 10 to 5, then this is what you have now. The main as amended. You still haven't decided to increase the fees. All you have decided is that now the main motion says 5% and not 10%. If you vote no on changing 10 to 5, then watch what happens. 3 yes, 4 no. This doesn't pass, and you're back to the main motion as it was. Now, somebody else can say, I move to amend by increasing from 10 to 15. If there's a second, then that goes on the floor. So what you're trying to do is come up with a perfected motion. So let's say we did change from 10 to 5 or 15. We have a main motion as amended. Yes, sir.
I'm going to be whether you ask the maker of the motion if it was okay to amend the motion.
Okay.
Where does that come from? Is that a special?
That's a misunderstanding. Remember when I said before, when the first motion went on the floor, it's no longer my motion, it belongs to the group.
Right.
And the maker of the motion for 10% is probably not going to like 5%. But that's not his call. That's up to the commissioners. Okay.
Majority.
So now we have the main motion as amended. And we're debating it back and forth and back and forth. Here's an example of another possible motion. Main motion, amend. The next one up is the motion to commit or refer to a committee. If we're talking about increasing the fees, if you're not ready to make a decision, sir, today, like you said, I want to hear what other people have to say, and somebody says, I don't know how much money that's going to bring in. Is that enough? I just don't have enough information. I think we need more information down the road. So I move that we refer this matter to the executive secretary or to a committee, including the executive secretary and somebody that would like to volunteer, and then a financial expert, and that you do the research for us and find out all of those answers. Okay? That's the motion. Is there a second?
Yes, a second.
It is moved and seconded to refer this matter to a committee composed of yet again.
So that's on the floor now.
That's on the floor. What is not on the floor is 5%, 10%. Should we even increase the fees? The only thing now on the floor is, should we send all of this to a committee? Yes or no? And you can see where committee refer. You can debate it. Somebody can say, yeah, I need more information, or, and you're going to see this in the scenario, it takes a majority vote. If a majority says yes, then watch, The entire pack is taken off the floor and given to the executive secretary, and will you be on the committee, and will you be on the committee, and will you come back at the next meeting and provide the answers. Okay? Now, anything else can go on the floor that's next on the agenda. If referring to the committee fails, and you still have the main motion as amended, but you haven't decided it yet. There's another possibility. This is the motion. Is one above postponed to a certain time.
Come back here.
We're just not ready to make a decision today, and that's okay. So I move we postpone this until the next meeting to give all of us a chance to do our own research and to look into this further. Is there a second? If there's a second, then the only thing under consideration is, do we postpone? It takes a majority vote. 4 hands yes, 3 hands no. If it passes, then it's given to the secretary to record that we did not make a decision now. We made a change in the motion, and we will bring it back for consideration at the next meeting.
So where does it come, okay, next meeting it comes back. Where does it start?
It comes back right there,
Okay.
as it was when it went. And those are pretty much the only motions that a typical group such as this has to deal with. And using the goldenrod sheet, what I've done is pretty much just gone on the procedure for handling the main motion, where someone makes the motion, seconds it, debates it, vote on it with a couple of intervening motions. The principles underlying parliamentary law are just pretty much what I said, 1, 2, and 3. Giving you some of the rules for debate. If a motion comes up that you're not sure what it means or how to deal with it, here's the rule book. You all have. Remember I said that a group wanted to limit discussion to 15 minutes on any one item? Well, what if they want more time? There is a motion, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'll call limit or extend the limits of debate. So we have a rule of order that says 15 minutes. How do you extend that? I move we extend the debate for another 10 minutes. Is there a second? Okay. It's amendable because you might want to extend the debate for 30 minutes, in which case then you put an amendment on top of it. It's not debatable because you want to get on with more debate. But please notice that this requires, according to Robert's rules, a 2/3 vote. And the reason for that is you're potentially taking away people's rights to debate or to move on. So there are a couple of motions that Robert says require a 2/3 vote. But that probably won't come up in your commission meetings. So that's another example of a motion. So you're not handcuffed by your own rules. Okay, let's try to put this into practice. I have a script, and I'm going to be...
Ask a question, Rick. A privileged motion. Can you describe that just briefly?
Okay.
Those are the ones I get in.
I mean, is it even worth it for our commission to decide?
Well, Robert puts all motions into 1 of 5 classes. Incidental motions are things that occur just out of an incident. A main motion is just what it says. The subsidiary motions apply to the main motion to make it better or to do something to it. And then the privilege motions are ones that you you got to take care of right now. So if somebody says, I'd like to recess, you can't say, well, let's think about that in 10, 15 minutes. It's privileged to do it right now. Take care of it even before other things are happening. There is a method to the madness that anything higher on this list on the left side has a higher priority. And whatever is at the top should be taken care of first.
What does raise a question of privilege?
Okay. I have a privilege that I am really hot in here. Is there any way, Mr. Chair, that we could turn down the heat or turn up the air conditioners? It's for the privilege, for the good of the group. Or if you can't hear the speaker because the microphone has gone off, you can interrupt somebody if you can't hear them. So, Mr. Chairman, I have a question of privilege that we fix the microphone. And the little plus there means usually no vote is taken, the chair decides. It's just something we take care of. Okay.
What about call for the question? I didn't see that on there, or is
Okay.
it just mention something different?
Call for the question is what Robert called previous question.
Okay.
And that's an old parliamentary term. If I could have gone back in time to 1876, I would ask Henry Martin Robert not to use this terminology, but to use the motion, let's vote, because that's what this means. He says, I move that we return to the previous question, meaning whatever previous we had on the floor, no more amendments, no more debate, let's just vote. And that's what this motion means. And whether you say, I call the question or I move to the previous question, the catch is one person cannot do this autocratically. And some groups think that if anyone yells out, question, I call the question, oh, okay, then we have to stop the debate and vote. No. What does it take in a vote? 2/3, because you're taking away people's rights to vote. And if somebody calls question, oh, okay, no more debate, hey, that's one person's opinion. That's not the group. And it takes a formal vote. So it takes a second, there's no debate, there's no amendment, 2/3 vote. So those in favor of stopping the debate, having no more amendments, and going to a vote, please raise a hand. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. Hands down. Those opposed to stopping debate, raise a hand. 2, 1, 2. Thank you. Hands down. By a vote of 3 yes and 2 no, it does not have a 2/3 vote. It is a continued debate. 4 yes and 2 no, now you have 2/3.
No, that's 50% of the other house.
4 yes and 2 no is 2/3. That's 4 yes out of 6.
Oh, 6, okay.
Okay. So let's play this one out. Bob, come on up here. You're the chair. I'm going to put the motions on the floor. Brett, I'm going to ask you to serve a role as kind of the official spokesman parliamentarian. Go over here.
There you go. Stay in the shade.
Member A.
Tennis advisor. Yeah.
Member C, you just read your script. Member D. Member E.
Yeah. I want to play.
Everybody has one. Member F. Member G. And
Remember I?
no, no. So, yeah, we can move that around and
Wes, do you want mine?
I think the motion should be the white lines for the terminal.
Be two people.
Mr. Chairman,
All right, are there any questions or any consideration items?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Sonio.
as noticed, I move that we buy a new filing cabinet for the Airport Commission office.
It's been moved that we buy a new file cabinet for the office. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we have a motion on the floor.
We really need some additional filing space. We have lots of documents that our executive secretary must keep and preserve. The secretary is running out of storage room. I hope everyone votes in the affirmative on this matter.
Any
Chair.
commissioner like to speak to the motion?
keep this straight.
Oh, does it?
That's where I was. Oh, we're not, oh, okay, we're ready to opposition. Anybody care to speak to opposition of the motion?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Forrest.
thank you. I do not think we need to spend money on this. Our executive secretary has been doing okay so far with what we've got, and we could always clean out our existing file papers to make room for the new documents. This adds expenses to unnecessary, and I'm voting no.
Thank you, Commissioner Forrest. Is there any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Purvis.
Now notice, recognize my name or by nodding or whatever. In a group of 7, that's probably not as critical, but if you've got a larger group, only one person fits on the floor at any one time, and you want to make it clear who has been recognized.
Probably in our case, it's better to name them because we kind of sit in a line and seeing each other is difficult.
Good job.
my fellow members, right now our files are badly disorganized. Last week I wanted to look at the minutes from our January meeting to see exactly what recommendation we made to the city council. I had to look through piles of papers for 40 minutes to find those minutes. This is a severe problem, and a new filing cabinet will help solve it. We need to authorize this expense, so we really need to pass this motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Purvis. Is there any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Johnson.
I'm generally in agreement that we probably need some new space in the office, but I'm concerned that we're not given specific guidelines for a purchase, that we might end up with an inadequate new cabinet. Therefore, I move to amend the original motion by inserting the words metal 4-drawer between new and filing cabinet.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded to amend by inserting the word metal 4-drawer between new and filing cabinet. So the main motion would read that we buy a new metal 4-drawer filing cabinet. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Are you ready to vote on the amendment?
See, here again, this scenario is based on the fact that you could do a voice vote on procedural matters.
Okay, the question is on the amendment to insert the words metal 4-drawer between, where did I go here? Between, the main motion would read that we buy a new metal 4-drawer filing cabinet for the Airport Commission office. Shall the amendment be adopted? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
No, hold on. See, the reason, just to say opposed, you really have to be specific, as the script says. Those opposed, tell them what to do.
Okay, those opposed say no.
Right. You just sort of assume, all those in favor, what do you want them to do? So you always notice that he made it really clear what you're voting on. You're not voting on a
question is now on the main motion as amended. Is there any further discussion on the amended main motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Shoemaker?
I don't think just by the file cabinet can solve the problem. Someone suggested the real problem is that not enough time is being spent in the office keeping up with the needed filing through no fault of the executive secretary. Therefore, I move to amend the current motion by adding the phrase and require all commission members to commit a minimum of 2 hours per week to working in the airport commission office.
Yay, that's a windfall.
Yeah.
The members will stand at ease while the chair confers with the parliamentarian.
Okay, stand at ease is an old military term that Henry Martin Robert, Major and later a general, would have used, that if you're at attention, to stand at ease means you don't leave the area, but you don't have to be so rigid. And I threw that in just because I have fun with military terms, being a vet myself. So, okay, so go ahead and confer with the executive secretary parliamentarian.
Okay, or Mr. Parliamentarian, is the executive secretary the parliamentarian?
He is.
Is this proposed amendment proper? Seems to be on a different subject matter than talking about a filing cabinet.
No, this amendment is not germane. What that means is that it proposes an action that is not on topic of the motion being considered. It can only be presented as a new main motion after the current matter has been fully taken care of.
Thank you. The chair rules that the amendment just presented is not in order since it is not directly germane to the subject being discussed at this time. We will continue debate on the main motion as amended. Is there any further discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner White?
due to my concern about the potential costs of such proposal, I move that we refer the matter to a committee of 3 appointed by the chair with instructions to research the potential costs of various file cabinets and report back at the next meeting.
Second.
Move to second that we refer the filing cabinet motion to a committee of 3 appointed by the chair with instructions to report at the next meeting. Is there any discussion on the motion to refer?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner
Phew.
Chris?
Yes, thank you. My comments are short and to the point. I don't think we should stretch this matter out any further. I recommend voting against sending this to a committee, and I recommend deciding the issue immediately today. We need a decision now.
You see, what's under debate now on the floor is refer or don't refer. You don't want to get tied down with the cost of how many drawers, what the executive secretary is doing. You don't want to get sidetracked. You're talking about volunteering hours. It's just not germane to this. Right now, do we or don't we refer?
Commissioner White, do you wish to speak to the issue?
Yes, I do. It would be great if we could decide the matter today, but we just don't have enough information to make a reasonable decision. Until we discover the cost of such a purchase, we really can't commit money from our allotted resources. Let's be careful.
Is there any further discussion on the motion to refer? Are you ready to vote? The question is on referring the motion to buy a metal 4-drawer filing cabinet to a committee of 3 to be appointed by the chair with instructions to report back at the next meeting. Shall the motion be referred? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no.
No.
Those in favor, please raise your hand.
Good job. Good job.
1, 2. Those opposed, please raise your hand. Motion is defeated.
Okay. Had the motion passed, then Bob would have taken this off the floor, appointed the 3 members, handed it to, in effect, the group, told the secretary to record. The fact that it failed, the scenario does not go further, but this would still be on the floor, and you could amend it further. You could vote yes, then you have to figure out where you're going to get the money, and when you're going to buy it, who's going to buy it, who's going to install it, and you carry that out. If ultimately you vote no, then you've discussed it, it's been worthwhile.
Lucky wish you'd been the chairman.
Yeah, I know, it says I was the chair, what happened?
The group didn't want to do it.
Apparently not.
Okay,
Okay, so now we're back to the main motion as amended.
that's right. So then the scenario script stops there. But you get an idea of all that we've been talking about, a few simple motions, the rules of debate, you let people talk on both sides. The vote, and there are different ways. You notice that Bob said, I can't hear the difference between the yeses and the ayes and the noes. So he immediately said, please raise your hand. If it's a personality issue, and you're in closed session, you probably want to do a written ballot, a secret ballot. On the goldenrod sheet, there are forms for voting. And the roll call is the one that you generally have to use based upon your bylaws. And then right above that, there's that unanimous consent. If there's no objection, that's as if everybody independently voted yes. Show of hands. If it's in a large group, you get them to rise, but Bob did it just right. Show of hands. And the most common, quick is used is just those in favor say aye, those opposed say no. So this is for you to keep. I think we're pretty close to the we're at the 7:30. I'm in no hurry to hit the traffic going north. So, Brett, it's up to you and the group. Do you have questions?
I motion we extend the meeting an extra 15 minutes.
You're out of order. Actually, he's perfectly in order. See if you have any problems, concerns, situations. To me, the 2 hours went pretty quickly, so I hope it was.
Can I ask a question on just that? He didn't, the chair did not recognize the speaker. Does that mean that he can't talk?
Technically, yeah.
Okay.
The chair is in charge, and here a member rises or requests, says, Mr. President,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman. Then the chairman recognizes the member by name, title, or acknowledgement. And you gotta hold people to that, because if two people are raising a hand and start talking, one or the other.
We had this problem in the Airport Land Use Commission. Everybody would just start talking, you know, and I think it was kind of resented when the chair all of a sudden started requiring to be recognized. And you know, it needs to happen because it keeps order around.
Well, and then it makes it easy for whoever's doing the meeting minutes to take notes.
Yeah.
To figure out what's going on.
As long as we have a considerate chair.
Yeah.
Say again?
As long as the chair is considerate of making sure everybody is.
Right.
Now, one thing about the minutes, Brett, do you take the minutes?
Chris takes it.
Okay, according to Robert, now again, your custom may be different. Robert says you don't record what was said, only what actions were accomplished. So you don't say,
Commissioner Forrest.
yeah, Commissioner
You don't
Forrest
have to do
said this.
questions.
No.
Only
Right,
the
just
matter
a-
and the
And
final
what's
result.
really important is the action that was taken and by the vote. So if it's a roll call vote, you record each member's vote as yes, no, absent, or abstain. And then you record that it passed by a vote of such and such. You don't even need to record who seconded something. The second merely means that somebody thought it was worthwhile. I've seen groups argue over who seconded it. Because they both said second at the same time and they wanted their name in the minutes. You can indicate that there was discussion, but you don't want to put anything subjective in the minutes. So you would not say there was lively discussion or heated discussion. You can say the motion was made and seconded, After discussion, an amendment was presented and defeated, or presented and approved. After further discussion, the vote was taken, and the vote was this, and the motion was adopted or failed. And that's really, according to Robert, all you need.
And public comment, you don't, you just
Just record the
For
person?
public comment, this is not in Robert, it's my understanding of what most groups do. They have to fill out a public comment card. They
Card?
should give it to the secretary,
Helps.
and the secretary will record who spoke and on what topic. But you don't have to say they said this or said that. That's not part of the official record.
Can there be any overriding rules on that in our city charter or anything?
Double check.
What was the question? Are there any overriding rules in our city charter, our rules of order, anything on that?
So what we used to have very elaborate minutes, and since we started videotaping the sessions, I don't know if any of you have really noticed how much more slimmed down the minutes are. And most of the time, it just boils down to what was voted on. But if there was discussion that led to passing or defeating the item, we typically put that information in there, so it's just maintained for posterity, essentially. That's it. We've really trimmed down, and it's tough because you sit there and have to say, well, what do we want in there, what don't we want? We really try to put just a summary, third-person look at it, not biased or anything like that. We're always trying to make it shorter. Good.
Okay, other comments, thoughts, concerns, problems? Sounds like Bob does a pretty good job of that.
He's been doing.
Sold hat. It's been before.
Well, I know that way back, I was on another committee for 17 years, and during the city council meetings, most people always introduce themselves to the committee, but apparently times have changed, and now they do not have to say their name when they approach the council.
They don't have to, or they don't, because how can you record the public comment? Who,
With the card.
You just say anonymous person.
if we have the cards?
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't use cards.
Yeah, they don't use them.
The county does, but not the city of Salinas.
Okay, because that all would be a special rule of order that says if you want to speak publicly, you have to fill out a card, you have to put your name, you have to put your address. And that's a special rule of order.
I don't know if we have that.
We've traditionally asked them to state their name, but I don't know if we have any authority to do so.
Yeah, I don't think you have to, but it's
I was
polite.
told it was illegal to ask their name.
So again, that's a city attorney. And, yes,
I was told.
So I just want to,
If they want
for my own brain, so the process of making a motion, I need to, consider the motion or whatever, and somebody says, I second it, and then the chairman says, if it's one of those main motions, the chairman would then say, is there any debate? So that after the second, that's when we discuss it and where we can amend it. I always thought, see, this is where my erroneous thinking came in, is when she made something seconded, it was a done deal and it was on to the other place.
See, one thing to consider, if you discuss it before the motion is made, you don't even know what the exact wording is. You want to know exactly what the proposal is, what the motion is, what the resolution is. And you want it to be recorded by Chris in the minutes, the way it was presented, so that we can always look back and see, you know, what was the exact wording. Sometimes one word can make a difference.
Okay.
So you make the motion, second it, put it in the minutes, record that that's the motion.
And it's on the floor.
Then it
It's
goes on the floor, then it's discussed.
Yes,
And
okay.
everybody knows you're discussing, debating the same word.
Yeah, sometimes we'll get a presentation and then we'll just ask questions about it, then we'll discuss it in order to come to wording on the motion. Sometimes we have a motion that's provided for us that will say, we recommend that you approve the budget. And that's real easy. Sometimes we'll have questions about why this presentation was like this, and we'll start discussing it because we haven't decided how to word the motion yet. So that's where it gets a little, have we made motion or not? And we almost feel like sometimes we're debating it before we make a motion. But there is a point where you make a motion so that you can vote specifically on the exact wording of what the motion is going to be.
Part of what you're saying is why you have the amendment process too.
Yeah.
So I guess the way I kind of see this, and tell me if I'm wrong, if we are talking to Brett, asking questions, that is before we get to the motion part. If we're thinking about talking among ourselves, we should have a motion. Is that true?
Yeah, and if you do it without the motion, it's just going to go on, and everybody, I got this idea, somebody will bring in something new. The sooner you can zero in and narrow it down, this is the wording. And if you don't like the wording, you can approve it, amend it. If you don't understand it, ask questions, send it to a committee for further research, postpone it until we can think about it, or vote no, and then bring it up later. Some groups require all resolutions, proposals, motions to be pre-written with a copy to the president and a copy to the secretary. And then you know exactly what is being made.
For a small group, sometimes it's a little bit informal. Most of the time, we have unanimous decisions. I can't think of where we haven't had a unanimous decision in a long time.
In which case, if you have a proposal ahead of time, notice it's going to be unanimous. You even need to debate it or discuss it. If you want to explain it to the public, sure. But if it's just a matter of going to get 7 yes votes, put it on the consent calendar. Unless that's seen by the public as being
Rubber stamp.
rubber stamped.
We generally like to do individual because we have very few action items and we'll get a lot of information and then there will be something we'll be talking about in the future. So I don't see us needing to combine. Our meetings go short. In the past, they've gone as late as 11 o'clock and later, in which case there is a motion to make for that. We're very efficient. So it's
I have a question for you. When you have a motion and it's seconded and it's under discussion by the commission, is it acceptable or appropriate for the commission to ask questions of either staff or the general public, maybe in attendance, and have answers provided to them during the commission's discussion period after a second has been made?
Absolutely. Now, what some groups do, and I don't know where your public comment comes in,
After the board.
Near the end.
some groups running underground will present the motion, second it, it's on the floor, and at that point, they will ask for public comment on that motion. And the members of the board or commission just listen. Even if they're asked a question, the chair says, this is not a time for interaction, it's for the public to express an opinion. And that you, commissioners, should not feel the need to have to answer them or comment or anything. So that's how most groups work around, that each issue, and then one person, like that Oakland School Board had one person who wanted to speak on every issue, and they turned in a comment on every issue. They were pulling their hair out, and they said to me, how can you stop them from speaking on every issue? I said, you can't put it around, you can't. But then they also provide, as you might, a general comment, public comment for any item not otherwise on the agenda. Again, that's not to interact or put you on the spot, but it's for people to say, I hope in the future you do this, or I'd like to see that, or I'm really upset about this, and we just listen, you know.
Okay, one more question here about, okay, consideration. You said that we could bring up consideration. Doesn't it have to be on the agenda before we can bring it up? Before we bring something up? Otherwise,
Yes, otherwise it's not duly
Okay.
noticed.
Only in a future agenda item.
No, can I
okay, got it.
Can I clarify? I believe if it's only something that you're taking consideration of. So under announcements,
Oh, yeah.
you can
Right.
say, hey, this is what happened or whatever. But only if you're taking consideration, it would have to be noticed separate to the powers of the council.
Or future agenda items.
I do think that we ask the airport commission before we vote and after we've debated, we first ask the commissioners and then we do ask the public. As I recall, our lawyer was in attendance regularly. We would then ask the public for their comment afterwards. If somebody was on the commission and specifically knew that the business president of the Airport Business Association were there, then I asked that person to speak even before the public was asked to speak. But I think that we've done it that way. I think that that's what.
And you seven commissioners are in charge of that. The term I would use if I were chairing, you said, could we ask the president of the airport association to state an opinion? That's up to the group. And I would say, if there is no objection, then let the person speak, which is using the type of debate, a vote called unanimous consent. If there's no objection. If there is an objection, then you got to take a vote on allowing that person to speak as an outsider.
We would have a moment to speak anyway after the board would have follow the procedure.
Okay, I think we're good time to do it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Really appreciate it.